Jeff is the sweetest human. He's such a Cancer. I read this somewhere about Cancers and Aries where it's really good at being each other's cheerleaders in ways that we struggle doing that for ourselves. They're
Uh-huh.
really good at it naturally. So I was like, oh, yeah, that is kind of a little bit of our dynamic sometimes.
I read the first chapter of his mom's book, and, like, the way that she was describing him and his brother, his childhood, and things he was interested in. He
Yeah,
seems like he is a cheerleader for people.
for
Like
sure.
you can do it. I was recently thinking about what is the difference between people who do it, especially
Mm,
in the context that we're sort of talking to people about, like, that make their career as a musician, as a photographer, as, whatever. They do it, they get there. What's the difference between those people and the people who don't? And I feel like it's whether it's an external voice or an internal voice that is, like, constantly reminding you, you can do it.
right.
I don't ever remember having that external voice in my life, kind of, like my mom did. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
that's where the cheerleading for each other's always come into play, where it's like, I mean, Jeff basically handheld me in starting this label for Molly House. Like, I had no idea. Kelly had no idea. And like, he's always just been that person in such a great way.
He's a life
Um,
coach, he doesn't even know he's a life coach.
girl, well, he's about to join this conversation. You
Join
ready?
our team of life coaches for amazing artists.
Yeah.
Jeff,
Jeffrey
Hello.
Bratton.
Good to meet you, Piper.
good to meet you too. I was like, just Davo and I were laughing. I was like, I feel like Jeff and I would have been best friends.
I like to hear that. We need to hang when I'm in Maryland. Annapolis is a great place to call home. I mean, there's so many things to like about that area. Of course, when you're young, all you want to do is to leave the places you were raised. And then you get a little older and realize that they were actually pretty good places to come up. And the sentiment turns a little bit. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that they're like good places to come up in the 90s. Like it was a different place and there was different things happening and it was special. It was a really special time and it is just so wildly different now, but also the same in a lot of ways.
I was actually
Yeah.
raised in Southern Maryland. I was down in Calvert County, 20
Okay.
miles south of
Yep.
Annapolis. So Annapolis for us was always really cosmopolitan. We would come to Annapolis
Mhm.
was not dissimilar to going to DC. It was sort of fancy. We'd go to the docks and it all felt upmarket and exotic.
Go to the moon and smoke cigarettes.
For
Totally.
sure, run around
Yeah.
the
Or
walls.
clove cigarettes.
Piper and I have been a little bit stuck on. We interviewed DDM, who I think you are at least familiar with, Jeff, like
Sure.
queer Baltimore rapper. And we were talking about why he never left, kind of like what would he think would have happened if left. And he was saying, we basically made this comment around Maryland is essentially a place where blue collar folks are raised, doctors and lawyers, very like inbox people are raised in Maryland. And so I think, yes, there were cool stuff that we got into, but a lot of us needed to get out to feel seen in larger spaces eventually. But
Yeah.
again, great for being raised, I think, too. Kind of
Yeah.
wholesome in that way.
Yeah. I think that's the Achilles heel of some of those small towns, especially like the DC area. The DMV is that anyone with like real like entertainment ambitions or really wants to do something in music or film, or tend to get lured out to the LAs and New Yorks of the world and even London's, et cetera. The DC area is such a hub of political activity, et cetera, that outside of some of those more corporate level jobs and the industries that support them, people with bigger creative ambitions end up in other cities and they take their cool ideas and they do it other places instead of keeping it in the DMV and doing those things there. So people that wanted to start their record labels or production studios do that in places like LA, and the area gets diluted.
It's kind of a shame. I moved away for many years, came back for about 7 years, moved away again and came back. In my 30s, I lived in Baltimore, which is where I met my husband. And there was this whole, it was like 2010s, this whole thing around like creative placemaking. And there was this sort of Baltimore's like this. It has these like resurgence and then resurgence and then with that like creative placemaking. And it was fun to be a part of that. But then all of the amazing people with their ideas that get that boon, then they leave. I left, and
But that was a great time. That was that Wham City copy
yes,
warehouse era
totally.
of Baltimore. That's still fetishized. I mean, I know some Baltimore heads out here in LA that still talk with reverence about that era of Dan Deacon and Adventure and
Beach House and Future
Right.
Islands.
and all the community that really surrounded that. And I don't know, Baltimore, I feel like they always have a hand in the fight. Beach House still rides for Baltimore. Turnstile's obviously been one of the biggest success stories of the last 5 years. There's nobody cooler in the scene right now, and they're proud Baltimore boys. I think a lot of those guys are still based there. Baltimore still has, I think Baltimore, you can never count Baltimore out.
And I think it's like one of the last cities that has honest grit that helps foster creativity in a lot of ways. Like it's not just, LA has a different kind of grit, but it's like we're living in this sunshiny place surrounded by a lot of wealth and abundance. And there's people that don't have that there as well. But Baltimore, like the disparities are so present in literally everywhere you go and everything that you do. And I don't know, there's something about that and the preservation of character. Like there just hasn't been a tax base in Baltimore to rebuild anything. So there's fertile soil to basically do whatever you want because nobody really cares.
Best way to put it. You're right. And I think that if we do look back on some of these like most fertile moments in creativity and the New Yorks and Detroits and in LA's and London's, they are when the cities are in a place where they can support the creative community, where it's affordable, it's probably after a downturn, et cetera. But it allows people to live and work and make their art and do their cool shit in a way that's affordable and reasonably economical and other cool people around there. But I'm sure that there are some factors that are at play in Baltimore that contribute to being a rich bed to create cool things.
Yeah. Cheap space.
Yeah,
Totally.
these cool people, a city that's not going to stress you out too much, give you space for your art or your parties, etc.
Well, I just hijacked that intro. Dave, you want to kick it off?
We love Baltimore. So yeah, today we're joined by one of my favorite besties in the world, Jeff Bratton. He is founder of the independent record label Cascine, a staple in indie, modern pop, electronic, and experimental music. Jeff also works with artist management, currently working with artists such as Yeule and Earth Theater, Com Truise, KCMQ. Also has a sub-label called CSCN for singles and off-brand works. Has put out singles like Double Duchess, which talks a lot about Jeff and I's inner connections of music and just being supportive for each other. And welcome to the pod, Jeff.
Thank you. No, it's an honor to be invited to have the conversation with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for such a lovely opening.
Super happy to have you. A couple things. We were just talking about Baltimore and the DMV. Some words that will instantly link you and Piper, I think, is buzz and fever and ultra world, right? Like
Totally.
very quintessential rave names for places here in DC, which I know.
90s DMV. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Which Jeff was a big part of. Tell us what that scene was like for you. How did we get so passionate about music and what did it look like for you around that time?
That era that was like my second musical bump. The second time that I really fell in love with music. When I was young, I grew up on a skateboard and was obsessed with Britpop stuff. The Cure, the Jesus and Mary Chain, the Chameleons. Those were some of my earliest loves. But then dance music, the rave scene and the splashy breaks that were in Baltimore, some of the deeper house sounds like that really ignited that second passion. I feel like it picked up on some of the dream pop sounds coming out of Europe. And I feel like my modern taste in music is a real fusion of that. It's those sort of dreamy indie sounds mixed with the lushness of the electronic music that was being made in the 90s and beyond that. But we were lucky to have this incredible dance music scene in the DC Baltimore area in the 90s. For an area like Baltimore and DC, I think it was unusual that we had such a vibrant community there. I think next to New York on the East Coast, the DC Baltimore area was the next best zone for rave activity. Or like you were saying, Fever, Rise, Remedy, all the parties that would happen at the Paradox, the Orpheum, through all the after parties, Lonnie and Ultra World community, that warehouse that he would throw, that's the loft space that he would throw parties at. And then all the big parties, the Rave the Bays, the Sunrise, Bass Rush, etc. Like it was just a collage of dope shit. And then, Scott Henry and everything that was happening around the Navy Yard. Gosh, Tracks and Buzz, of course. What was the Buzz space? What was that zone called?
I can't even remember. I just remember
Tracks
like,
and Hammerjacks for
yeah,
sure.
like you would come off of New York Ave and you would turn south. And then you were just like in no man's land. And just like empty warehouses, right? Or empty at night. And then like, boom, there it was. And like Trax was like around the corner down. It's like if you couldn't get into Buzz, you would go to Trax. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that club was called Nation. And they were
Nation. That's right.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Let's back up for a little bit because I feel like you're right. It was such a special time in the DMV, whether it was cheap, big real estate that you could find warehouses very easily to throw these parties. I think Lonnie owned some of the warehouses that he had in Baltimore. And so that was fortuitous, right? But how did you even find out about this to get involved?
It's such a funny story. Like I said, I grew up in Calvert County, which is in southern Maryland, about 45 miles away from Baltimore, a little less than that from DC, but it was rural. So for us to even get hip to what was happening in Baltimore and DC was a bit of a mystery. We were buying acid at the time from this guy named Justin. One day in my old Volvo, Justin selling us acid from this sheet of orange sunshine, and he started telling us about the raves. It sounded like the most exotic thing I'd ever heard of. And all he knew is that it was happening on a street called Bayard Street in Baltimore. There was a party on Fridays, a rave on Fridays happening on Bayard Street. We were 15 at the time. My friend Brian King was a year older than us, and he had just got his license. About 2 weeks later, we said we were staying at our friend John's house. John had a basement. His room was in the basement. We got in Brian's old Ford Escort and drove to Baltimore. I think we followed a map. It's an old school paper map to Bayard Street.
Totally.
And sure enough, we got on Bayard Street just off of Russell Street when you would make that left. And you would hear that bass pumping down the block. It was like, that sound was like a dog whistle for us when we were young. That deep bass, it would just sort of rattle the car from a distance. And we were young. Everything was IRL at that point. The digital world hadn't come online yet. So we parked and fumbled our way to the front of that club. Before we were even inside, we bought acid, MDME, and MDMA. That's a whole other story on the drug stuff that surrounded that. But yeah, it was on Justin's suggestion to find this rave in Bayard Street.
And it's so funny. I remember the paper maps, the flyers, the name of a street, and trying to like piece together, like, where am I going? How do I find this thing that's happening that I feel like called to figure out? For me, it was I flunked out of speech class because it was 7th period and I never went. So I had to go to night school to pass speech again. And this kid in my night school class at Severna Park High
It would happen in night school.
was like 2 years older than me. I was like a sophomore and I was like 14 or 15 and he was 17 and he had to take it or he wouldn't graduate. His name's Scotty. And he had this like little black Ford Ranger and just the nicest guy. And he was like 7 feet tall, like this skater kid. And he was like, yeah, it's Thursday nights. He was like, so I'm going to this club called Fever. It's on Bayard Street in Baltimore. You should come after night school. And I was like, okay.
Amazing.
When you're young, you're running on sheer enthusiasm and curiosity and naivete. And so you do that stuff. You just follow your nose and off you go. And I think that's where the big wins come from. And I think that's what we lose as we get a little older. And if we play it safe, as a guy in my 40s now, I want things to be planned out a little bit. I want to have the lay of the land before I go to the event or the party or take the trip, et cetera. When I was young, I just ran headfirst into it all.
Let's talk about music because I think that's something the three of us have a lot to say and feel about. Obviously, you said that was your second bump in music appreciation, like that thumping bass being like a dog whistle. And, Davo, I know for you at the time, it was different sounds in the 90s that were sort of like the dog whistle for you. Jeff, what about music specifically gets you? Like pulls you in and you're like, I want to devour all of this.
Such a good question. And it's, I've always been pop culture obsessed as a kid. I always loved the way like culture sort of expresses itself, whether it's film and literature, music, fashion, even. I mean, I don't like have a position in any of those other industries, but I appreciate them from a distance. Music's always been the thing that's flipped the switch in the most visceral way. It's really been such an embodied reaction to music. When I hear something and fall in love with it, I feel it all throughout my physical form in a way that I don't with the most compelling read or film. It's good and I'm riveted, but music is the thing that just captures me wholesale. And I always felt that as a kid too. For me, it was always about the melodic choices that the music makers make in that song construction, regardless of what the production is, the drum programming, et cetera. I really need to hear a certain chord signature. It's sort of like this introspective, wistful, warmer, a little more major key based. I want it to stir my imagination. I want the song to be spinning. And I
He's a
always
pop.
that inside when music gets me there.
He's a pop girl.
Mm-hmm. I know what I like. And it's always, I would refer to it sometimes as like we know what we like when we taste it. And when the vanilla, hits my mouth, I enjoy it. It's not something I have to think about. I know what it is that tastes good to me. And music has the same effect. It's when something like hits my ears and it's resonant to me, my body registers it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of your story was eventually finding opportunity that had a specific landscape of sounds, I think, that you really maybe already gravitating towards. But before that, what I would like to talk about is when Jeff and I met on a video shoot for a band that Piper, Kaz, that we were in, and I had no idea who Jeff was. I didn't know anything about Jeff, but Jeff showed up to be an extra hand for a video shoot of a friend and never met him before. Long story short, that became like Jeff and I became very fast friends after that, I think. Jeff was working in a corporate setting. You were working in PR and marketing, and I think I get this right, but I think you were part of the McDonald's ba-da-da-ba-ba commercial, which is like one of my favorite fun facts about you. That like I love that you were probably figuring it out from the night before, like in these meetings. Even then, I could tell you were there, but you weren't there. You were such like an independent, music-minded, passionate person. And like ever since then, that's what we've always connected on. And even I was in a big transition period. I know you were in a big transition period. And I think meeting then has always been interesting because I feel like we've watched each other grow significantly in directions that we've wanted to.
Yeah.
From the second that we met. I was about to move to San Francisco. I was about 6 months out before that. Jeff was living in Venice. And this is what I've understood and have seen you do time and time again, starting from me being in my room, not knowing anybody in San Francisco. Jeff would come up once a month from LA. We would just like literally bop around San Francisco. I didn't know anything about the city. Jeff really didn't know either. We knew that there were some cool /CD/ like interesting things happening. And we would just like make a weekend of it. But like during that time, I would be in my room, like working on stuff. And I would just be like, yeah, I'm working on this thing. And Jeff was like, can I hear it? And you were the first person that was like, yeah, you should put this out. And I was like, ooh, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure. Like, it was like my first solo attempt. I'd always been in bands. And you were like, you should make a Splash website page. And I was like, ooh, that seems professional and official. You know what I mean? You were really the first person that ever encouraged me to have that sort of like, you can do it energy in the very like soft, cancer, gentle way that you operate. I've seen you do that in such a natural way from that moment forward. You're always like, oh, I was in town and there's a guy I knew in North Carolina and I just wanted to like have coffee. And so I reached out to him because it sounds like he might be making some cool stuff and I just want to hear it. I kind of want to know, where were you when you were working that corporate job and you were also exploring that. Tell us where you were mentally in that space and what made you want to quit your corporate job and be curious about releasing music.
Yeah, be like professionally curious
Yeah, exactly.
about
Like
artists and
exactly. Like
music.
I've seen it so like natural, but like when did it feel like it needed to become professional for you? Where were you headspace wise?
I think it was a perfect fusion of I had just gotten sober in 2006 and I'd come out of school with a degree in marketing. And yeah, I was working for big PR agencies, corporate PR agencies. I was on the McDonald's Corporation account. We had launched the I'm Loving It campaign a few years earlier, but yeah, it was a huge part. I spent 2 years working on that stupid campaign. And, it was like, that was good work. We got paid to think, got paid to, build these like marketing, these communication strategies around these products and services. But it was nothing more than just a job. It really was like a means to an end. But I had sort of been raised in that with that mindset of like, work was supposed to be that. Work wasn't necessarily supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be something that paid the bills and you endured it. You found something generally in your frame of interest and then you just endured it. I was really obsessed. Like I said, music's always been the thing that drove my passion in a way that nothing else did. There was something happening in music. This is the late 2000s. It's a really incredible time for indie music. I was really obsessed with what was happening overseas, especially in Scandinavia at the time. There was this sort of wistful pop music being made in Stockholm and Copenhagen that was really special. And it had really captured me. And I wanted to do more with it than just be a fan. And I was at a point where I guess I was just feeling a little more courageous than I had previous times in my life. And I also don't think that I expected it to be a professional endeavor. And I had reached out to some of the record labels. There were two record labels specifically that were doing it better than anybody else at that time. One was called Labrador, the other was called Service. And I reached out to them with cold emails and offered my help as an unpaid intern. I said, is there anything that I can do from a distance based in the States? I have a little bit of marketing experience. What can I do from here to help with the label? And thankfully, the guys at Service got back. I mean, they offered me a position. They were curious though, and the conversation opened. And after a few months of going back and forth, they had given me an email address to the label, and I was helping them from a distance communicate with their US partners and do some legwork in the States. I wasn't getting paid for it. It was just an internship, but that opened the door for me to then continue to lean into that. And then there was a long series of events that allowed me to step back from that and start doing it professionally and build something that actually made money. But that was the entry point, me running on pure enthusiasm, being obsessed with what was happening in this sort of exotic locale, and me just putting myself out there, extending myself in a way that was risky and bold and a little naive at the time. But, fortune sort of favors those qualities. And next thing I know, I had a seat at the table.
I feel like that is the vibe of your mid to late 20s, right? Fortune favors the bold, the risk takers of like, let me just put myself out there. I'm willing to do it for free. Let me just get a foot in the door. Let me see what happens. I'm not afraid to talk to people. How has that changed for you, if at all, over the years?
It has, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at things now through the lens of like, and I hate to say it, commercial success more than critical success. I mean, the goal is to things that do both, that are commercially trending towards success, where things are clicking in the market, but are also really cool. And, there are great examples of that. The Rosalias, Twigs, and the Arcas, and, the Shy Girls, people that, the projects are working, they're driving dollars, and they're also really critically interesting. So those are the things that I'm after these days, more that in the early days, I could have cared less about if it made money or not. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to be really passionate about it. It was all about the art. And these days it is still all about the art, but I want the art to be, there are the realities of life that we have to consider. We have mortgages and bills and a lifestyle that we need to maintain at a minimum. Those factors tend to play a bigger role than they did 20 years ago, for sure.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just a function of knowing what life costs and wanting to make sure that I'm taking care of my basic needs, with the career path that I've chosen, and also knowing that the time is limited. There's so many demands on my time during the day that I really want to make these hours count. And I know that 5 hours put into a developing artist means that's 5 hours not put into someone who's already succeeding at a level. And what does that mean for the bottom line at the end of the month? And I'll never make decisions based solely on the commercial considerations, but as I get older, I do tend to pay attention to those a little bit more than I did when I was younger.
Yeah. I was going to ask, as I've sort of dabbled in the land of running a label as well, like these investments are essentially something that you may not get back, right? Knowing that sort of like you're not working, as a major with this huge expense account, like what skills do you feel like has helped you sort of balance financially and emotionally speaking in keeping the label afloat, like in a way that feels sustainable for you?
You've got to be smart and you got to be economical about where you spend that money. If you're going to put a budget of X into a release, you need to look at like previous releases and say, what has worked in the past? What's going to be the most effective use of this, 30 grand, for example? Are we going to dump all that into a fancy music video and then have nothing for other marketing efforts? Are we going to put all that into the production and make sure that the music is A plus, but then skimp on the marketing? And you really have to assess it, release by release to see what's going to make the most sense for that particular one. But in general, I think you need to look back at what's worked in the past and then make smart decisions about where you think this current project is going to sit in the market and how to allocate your money around that. The thing with music is it's constantly changing. The music industry, I think, sits at like this bleeding edge of pop culture, and then pop culture's evolutions in the ways that every time there's a new like consumption, we go from MP3s to streaming, we go from MySpace to TikTok virality. These are huge changes in the music industry that happen relatively quickly. Music is always at the forefront of that. By the time film and TV and literature have caught up to these new consumption models, music has already been deep into the forest for years at that point. So I think that there's a lot to acclimate to, and we really need to be as well informed as possible because the things change in our industry constantly. And if we're not careful, we can feel like we're on the sidelines of an important way to market a release or drive visibility for it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second. You probably at this stage, given your history, given your love of pop culture, music, have an intuitive sense of what you are sure will work. And at the same time, music is at the forefront of how consumption evolves and changes with technology and over time. And so there's a lot of unknowns there. And you were talking about like, yeah, I make a lot of business decisions based on what works, but what works is probably changing. So how do you balance that intuitive sense? Like, I'm absolutely sure this will work, or I'm going to place bets on this new artist versus what's working is changing. Like, how do you balance that?
It's a great question. And it is something that is really an inexact science. For me, in making the call, like when I would make the call on a new artist to work with, or on the label side, I would make the call on a new release to get behind. I think that for me, it does tend to lean towards the popular sounds. I need to live with that release long enough to know if it really feels like quality material. I can get caught up in stuff that feels good in the moment, but that can feel ephemeral. Something can sound great at the first 5 listens, but then it can start to feel thin as you get deeper into living with that release. And the stuff that really feels special, I think, is stuff that feels resonant right off the bat. So I think that I need to spend more time living with the art to make sure that it feels time tested and truly quality, and not just full of short-term tricks that can feel good in the moment. I used to use the expression or the analogy to the fruit stripe gum. Do you remember fruit stripe gum?
Oh my God, yes.
Fruit stripe gum was it was pure euphoria right off the bat. Those first 5 minutes of a piece of fruit stripe gum were the best thing ever. And then at minute 5, the flavor plunged. It disappeared.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just like chewy paper. Yeah.
No lasting power.
It
Yeah.
disappeared. And pop music can be that for me sometimes. Right?
Mhm.
get a little deeper into. And it's like, holy shit, I thought this was such a quality release. And it doesn't feel like that. So I think it's living with those things, staying curious about the ecosystem, just trying to stay informed. As someone in my 40s, I can be dismissive of the latest things. I can be completely dismissive of AI and some of the new ecosystems that are emerging around music. I'm really trying to force myself to be curious at a minimum, just to not turn a shoulder to something off the bat and to see where it could potentially apply to me and the work I'm doing. And if I don't have the answer, to lean into people that do. There are a lot of smart, driven young people in these creative fields. And the more we can share, open the conversation, share the knowledge, and invite people into our projects, the better they'll be. We exist in our own little world so much anymore. I think there's an aversion to the collaboration these days, and that's a big problem. We're better when we're working together. I certainly am better when I'm working with the broader team and pulling them in to the projects I've got on my plate.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as like staying connected to kind of what you're doing now, Cascine celebrated 10 years.
Yeah, coming up
Yeah.
on 13 years at this point in time.
I mean,
Amazing.
congratulations. It's amazing. Knowing that there's like many aspects to a release from a label, from designing PR campaigns to art direction to song selection and notes. What is still the thing that keeps you the most like passionate? What's the thing that gives you that, oh man, I still love doing this?
When I know I'm sitting on a release that feels special, I can't wait to share that. And I do think that, and it's not a share, it's the sentiment is not, let me put this in the world to gain the accolades and the shine from having released something special, but it's, let me try and connect with the people that I know are going to give a shit about this release. We have our fan base is modest. It's a modest operation, but we do have people that genuinely care about what we do. The thing that I've always been most interested in pop culture is things with a point of view, things with an identity, whether that's a production studio for movies, a fragrance or skateboard company, shoe company, or a record label. I think that we need to have an identity, have an aesthetic world that we create around our company. It needs to be representative of who we are as people. It needs to feel organic. So I have people that do care about what we do, and they're people that share my sensibility and music and art. And so it's a very satisfying thing to think that I'm going to transmit this thing to them that I am confident is going to click with them. And
Yeah.
and it's that spirit of sharing that I think is the most exciting thing for me when we're readying a release.
It's like building that trust, essentially.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
lots of
That
people.
ongoing communication with the fan base, with other people that, really are more, and fans that's not even the right word anymore. It's just other peers that I'm get to share music and art with on a regular basis.
Yeah. So there's a moment you shared with me, I think it was last year. I want to talk a little bit about management, which has been an addition to the label in the past, 6, 7 years for you, I guess you've been managing?
Yeah.
I hadn't moved into management. There was a moment when you were like, you shared, and I don't get a lot of this from you. And so it felt significant, but you were like, you as well as your audience are pretty modest, right? Yeah. And I love that about you. It's very humbling, but you were saying how like you felt pretty proud that one of your artists was being billed next to one of your favorites at Coachella when one of your artists was playing alongside Sade, who's a huge favorite of yours. And it felt like a proud moment for you. How does your relationship or connection to the artists that you manage versus the records that you're putting out? How do those relationships, how are these similar and how are they different?
I think that on the label side, it's really about the art. You're working on the release, and that release is a vehicle for the audio and the art package and the concept, whatever the theme of that record is. And you finish the release, and it's this self-contained creative item, this container for this like moment in time that goes into the world and has an arc, and it has the campaign, and you release singles and album launches, and then there's the whatever you're going to do on the other side of it, remixes and touring and some shows, etc. But an album has an arc, and then it comes and goes. It's finite. An album campaign is about 6 to 12 months, and then you're on to the next thing. So on the label, I'm constantly working on just the art, and it's all about the release. On the management side, you're working on the art with the artist, but then as soon as the release is out, you're into whatever's next. That's usually touring and live stuff, or it's back into the studio, or it's in the publishing matters, etc. So you're really strapped in with the artist with no end in sight. It doesn't conclude itself nicely like a album campaign does on the label side. With the artist, you're in it with them from start to finish. It's, from record to record. And so it's a lot less satisfying, in my opinion, to put a release out and then it ends and you sort of high fives to the team and then you're on to the next thing. And I find that more creatively fulfilling than I do with management, where you're really just strapped in with that artist for years with sort of no end in sight. So it could be a really beautiful thing when you like the artist and you enjoy working with them and it feels genuinely collaborative. It's really cool, but it's a very different dynamic and it's less creatively fulfilling, in my opinion. But it's important work. The artists need good teams, and it's a real honor to be invited in to that sort of inner sanctum of the artist world. The manager is like that first point of contact to the artist. You're the conduits, the label, publisher, and booking agents, sync agents, publicists, and radio teams. And that's a real honor to be that person.
Yeah.
The artists I work with on the management side are bigger than the artists I release on the label. And that's not a knock on the label. I think what the label does best is we take artists from 0 to 60, where we really are a good platform for emerging artists. It's when an artist is at 60 and ready to make that next bump, there are many good labels for that next rung of the ladder. But what Cascine really does is like, we help an artist define a point of view, find their point of view and refine that early on. And so I think that we represent a really important part in the market, and that is that ground floor zone. On the management side, I work with artists that are further along in their careers. So I am privy to bigger opportunities with those artists. And that's part of the fun of it, being able to be in some of those bigger rooms and stages like Coachella, et cetera, with management clients.
Sure.
Whereas Cascine artists don't always get those opportunities. And when those artists have reached the point where they are getting those opportunities, they've usually graduated to a bigger label.
Yeah, Cascine is such a nurturing label. And you have such a nurturing spirit. Like any artist, I think, would be so blessed to find you guys at that stage, because I think you would do anything. You're doing the work that many people don't want to do these days. And I think that's such an important thing, to find an artist and get them to where they're going. That's such a testament to the nature of how you even want to run your business and label. And I think that's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And I do think we represent a really important place in the process for artists. And I think there's this myth these days that because the distribution has become so democratized, anybody with the internet connection can release music. We could make a song for GarageBand today, and by Friday we could have it on Spotify. That's the reality of it. So you don't need a label to get your music out there and in the market. But there's so much that a label does apart from just delivering the music. It really is like helping an artist figure out what they want to look and sound and feel like, trying to figure out how to navigate the world of marketing and visibility, helping plug the artist into a community of other people that are going to click with what it is they're doing. So I don't think that just because we can release music on our own or we can get it up on the digital, on the DSPs, means that we're going to do it effectively or that eclipses the need for a label. I still think a good label is a crucial partner for artists.
Yeah.
David and I were laughing. We were like, Jeff is like a life and business coach.
1000%.
It's like everything that you're just describing, like help artists that are emerging, taking them from 0 to 60, like really helping them identify and refine their point of view and learn the ropes. Like, how are you a musical artist in 2025? Connecting them, like getting their releases made. And then on the management side, that's got to be a whole other can of worms. What was the moment in your life or in your career where you were like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to add that piece.
Actually, that's the funny thing. We got dragged into management by, there were some artists in our like just social circle that needed management, that needed help. I was running the label as dear friends with a music attorney named Matt, and Matt was managing some people on the side. I was helping some friends with some management concerns on the side of what I was doing, but no one was getting paid for this. It really was just, we were just passionate about these other projects and helping the community in a way. Like I said, it was just a labor of love. And then all of a sudden, two of those artists did start to do well. And the projects did start to over-index commercially. And we were like, okay, shit, there's a bigger need for like real management. We have to actually be like capital M managers in these moments. And so we just leaned into the opportunity. And as the opportunities escalated, and we had to learn the ropes. Neither one of us had professional management experience. We just responded to the opportunities as they continued to increase with a couple of those artists. And then that led to us being more full-time managers. And then Matt made partner his firm. So he stepped out of management altogether. He's still an attorney for a lot of the artists that we work with. But then I got positioned as the manager guy. And I still, sort of assume that role. Most days, I'd say that a lot of my days, it's 70% management these days and 30% label, just as some of those artists their careers have started to do well. It's just responding to the demands of the day and can be pretty full time.
Yeah. I feel something that you've not outright said, but touching on is like leading a life path that's in response to what's happening. And I think for a lot of people, especially going full circle back to how we started this conversation, being from Maryland and being raised in a place where there's a lot of government jobs, a lot of blue collar jobs, it's very agricultural here. So you either go to school to learn a trade, become a steam fitter or a doctor or a lawyer or a federal worker, et cetera. And there's not many examples of quote unquote job tracks in more creative, entrepreneurial, off the beaten path directions. In some ways, like a lot of the people that we interview on this podcast have gone off the beaten path. And it has been that sort of like, I'm just responding to things that I'm curious about, things that I'm passionate about, and the opportunities that come my way. And we're so indoctrinated and taught, you got to have a plan and you got to take action steps on your plan. And even David and I talk about this with our clients, like to some degree, you do have to have some direction or some plan that you take action on. But it sounds like your career path, moving out of corporate and going this direction, has largely been about you just responding to the opportunities that are in front of you. Does that feel true?
Yeah, it does. Certainly on the management side, I think that leaning into the things that feel right. And there's, I oftentimes use this mental image of a door that if the door's engaged in it's swung completely shut and you're pushing on the door without turning the handle, it's not going to push. You could push that door unless you push it through the door frame, it's not going to swing open. It could be a heavy door, but if that door is fully locked, it's not going to open. Even if it's a heavy door and you push against it and it's slightly off the frame, it will push open. And I leaned into the things that do feel like there's a little give there, things that do start to feel like they are working on some degree, even if it's hard work, but if they are moving, those are the things that I continue to lean into. If on the other hand, something is just not moving at all, if I've gone after an opportunity and like that door just feels firmly shut, I let it go. If we're honest with ourselves, we know what's working. We know what doors are closed.
Look at Jeff over here giving life coaching
That's
metaphors.
sage wisdom right there, right? Like, quit jamming the square peg in the round hole.
Yeah. And I've had so many opportunities that recently, like there have been a few examples of me trying to pursue some things over the last year that just didn't work. And, and I had to let them go and pivot into some other directions. And that's fine. But I really did push against that door and the door didn't open. And that's okay.
So I feel like there's like a difference in people, right? There's people who will push and push and push. The door is not opening. And then they'll completely shut down. What was I thinking? I could never, and they'll almost like regress in some ways. And you probably see this working with artists, right? And yet there's other people, and you sound like you're one of them, that you're like, okay, it's time to stop pushing on that door, but I'm just going to push on a different door.
Yeah. It's where I think we need the support of our community. if we're all alone in those closed door moments, it's easy for me to get really despondent and just feel alone and lost. And then I do shut down, and then I do just retreat back to what I know. And that's usually me going back many steps. The things that we know are the things that we knew in previous chapters of our lives, and either the things we've outgrown or the things that no longer serve us. But if I'm surrounded by other people that I can share those failures with, people that are going to help lift me up when those inevitable failures happen, that's when I find myself with the resiliency to push into what's next, is to like try and look for the next opportunity, is to stay optimistic. I need other people around me, whether that's professional people or just homies on the path. Look, man, I felt the same way. That door that I wanted open didn't open for me either, but let's get this next one, et cetera. There's a lot of strength in community, especially when you're like dealing with creative in these creative industries, trying to do things that, are inherently creative and inherently not guaranteed to be successful. It's not like you're a
Sure.
CPA trying to do someone's tax return. We're trying to put art into the world and make something on it in the process. It's not a guaranteed thing.
Yeah, we're making something that like does not have a blueprint. There's no guarantee, and the outcome is even if you have a clear creative vision, the outcome is still unknown. You don't know how it's going to be received, you don't know where it's going to lead, and that takes a lot of courage and learned confidence.
Learned confidence. I really think that's the crux of it. And I do think having like supportive people around us to help us learn that, and also help to point out the lessons along the way. There's so many times that we do things and then miss the lesson or the juice in the whole thing, unless we have people around us to say, wait a minute, take a beat, look at that. That was actually a real victory. Let's appreciate that.
Yeah. I think it also speaks to why I feel like the label is so important and valuable, because it's that moment of feeling seen, like the amount of times that I finish a record and I love it, but that's one part of the equation. I still need to find somebody who loves it enough to put money and market it, so I can have those moments with my friends of, oh yeah, it's really good. Like sometimes records don't hit, but at the same time, when they do, to have somebody really recognize the effort it will take to find its audience is such a valuable and impactful thing for anybody. That because you're just automatically sinking into a community that sees you at such a root level.
Yeah.
Such acceptance is just built in there.
Yeah. That idea of being seen it is so essential, because it can be
It's
such a singular path, the creative stuff. But it's nerve wracking to put something into the world and wait for the response to it. And sometimes no response is worse than a bad response, just to have it
Sure.
feel like what we spend so much time working on got ignored can be really heartbreaking. But to have other people, whether it's a label or a team, rally around it and say, no, not only do I like your art, but I'm willing to invest my time and money into helping prop it up and drive visibility for it, is
Yeah.
a really important co-signer for the project.
Jeff, I'm so curious, like on the topic of failure and community and all the things.
We love that topic here.
What's the failure you're so glad happened?
God, what a good question. Just like thinking back over the last few years, we had a client that was doing better than anybody, that all of our other clients, and we part ways last September. We worked together for almost 8 years at that point in time. Really took that project from being a bedroom project, one with a real global footprint. And we made the decision to part ways after a long time working together and a lot of success. And at the time, it really felt like a failure. Felt, I had not done a good enough job with the project to keep it going, to keep the relationship intact. And at the end of the day, it really felt like we had completed a chapter, we completed a cycle together, and we both knew it. I think it was better at the time to let things end naturally instead of trying to prolong this thing that was organically coming to a close. And what felt like a failure at the time opened my life to other opportunity, and has given me, I'm much happier now on the other side of that relationship. And the projects that I'm working on now, the other clients that I've taken on since then, are substantially bigger. And there's more abundance than I had with the previous clients. But at the time, you're heartbroken because the one relationship is ending, but you just can't see on the other side of that. It really is where we have to trust the universe to tumble into the future and know that we're going to be propped up when we get there. You don't have that foresight, but yeah, what felt like a failure then has given me a much better quality of life and access to bigger projects that I didn't anticipate when that relationship was ending.
I love that so much because I think that trust of I can let this thing go and make space for other bigger, greater, different things to come in. That is a process that keeps a lot of people stuck in their lives, especially as we get older, right? In our 40s, it's like we get caught in what I call like the comfort zone versus the courage zone versus the shit your pants zone. I'm comfortable here, even though this clearly needs to come to a close, but I don't want to let go of it because it's comfortable. And like really having that courage to let things close, let space open, and trust that no matter what's on the other side, it will catch you. There will be opportunities, abundance that can come in. And that trust, I think, is really hard for people to have. Gone is the naivety and the blinders of our 20s and 30s. And it feels a little bit harder to make that risk and close something that we are comfortable with. Does that feel like a lesson that was true for you too?
Completely accurate. Completely accurate. Yeah, I always want to know I want to know what's on the other side of that ravine. If I'm going to let go of the trapeze, I want to know what the other one looks and feels like and when it's going to catch me. The hardest thing
Yeah.
is to let go and be comfortable with the free fall. But that's where the magic lies, And I think if we look back at our lives, we see that all of those moments of free fall, we are inevitably caught by this spirit of the universe that absolutely had our back. But when we're like in this next tumble, we think that, no, this is the moment where I'm actually going to fall. This is when I'm really going to hit the ground. But there's been no precedent to that. Every time I let go of that one trapeze bar, I've always reached out and the other one has appeared. So it's trusting that when we let go of the current one and we are in that period of ambiguity, so we need to trust that that next opportunity will manifest when the time is right. It's being comfortable with that gray area in between. I think that's the hardest thing for me and my colleagues to do.
Yeah.
Thank God for all this manifestation language that's come into our cultural lexicon in the last 30 years.
Yeah. Well, it's like I was hoping and also knew that the conversation would get here because this tends to be when Jeff and I have these long conversations around various artists for him or changes for me or party, whatever it is, we always go back to like, God's got us. And remembering that surrendering to the universe has really only lended itself to me getting to a space that I couldn't imagine on my own. Oftentimes I'm too immersed in what's happening or what I need to let go of currently. I can't see where that's going, but I'm also too in it. Like Piper always says, you can't read the label from inside the jar. It's similar in that way. I think just being able to remember if there's been ever point that's happened for someone to be able to recall that. And again, going back to around like community or people around us, it takes that person to remember for you in that moment to be like, hey, yeah, that sounds like this thing that I can remind you about right now because you can't see it. And you're like,
That's
oh,
exactly
yeah, got
right.
it.
Yeah, it is. It's so crucial that we call it. In Buddhism, they call those wise friendships. It's just people that remind us of spiritual principles, that bring us back to those principles, that remind us of these cosmic principles that are at work in our lives. And we need those other voices in the room to remind us of that. It's other people that give a shit about us, that just share the path with us and have our best interest at heart. But yeah,
Yeah.
community is ever important.
Well, if you wanted to be a life coach with us, Jeff, you would be great.
You really would. There's so many things we could talk about your love and passion for Buddhism and where that's taken you. I wanted to talk about the book with your mother called Stay Close. So we'll just have to have you back on eventually.
We'll have to have you back on.
I'd be
More
delighted.
stuff to talk about. We always love to ask, what is next for either Jeff Bratton personally or some of the artists that you're representing?
Gosh, hopefully some new label deals with management clients. Most immediately, we have a tiny desk coming up, which I think will be really fun. Hopefully I'll get to see you, David, when I'm in DC for that. And
I
then
already invited Piper also, so I was just waiting for the official co-sign from you.
Let me know.
Because when last we talked about it, it was pending, so I just was not sure.
the invite is wide open. Yeah, we had a call with them yesterday, and we have the
Amazing.
green light to invite guests. That'll be a fun moment. There are a few things in like an artist's career that are these little milestones. It's Tiny
Yeah.
Desk, Coachella, Primavera, Glastonbury, label deals, etc. But so this is like a fun little moment for that artist specifically. 2026, we're doing an EP series with an artist I've loved for years named Hyde. It's an artist named Hayden Dunham. And worked with Hayden in many capacities over the years, but Hayden has an incredible batch of material that we're going to craft this EP series around and like roll that out.
Amazing.
Bells and whistles over the course of 2026. We're trying to finalize that now, and that'll be an early 2026 announcement. Casey, a management client, is out with an artist named Mo for the month of January. It's a big US tour, so it'll be a lot
I
of
love Casey. I'll have to come see that East Coast, or if you're doing DC, a DC show.
Please. In fact, he's
Yeah.
music directing the OK Lou tour right now. And they have a Tiny Desk on Friday of this week, and then that tour kicks off. I'm sure they're playing DC on that tour. So I don't know if you like the new OK Lou album or not, but I think it's a masterpiece. If they're playing DC, y'all should go.
Yeah,
Listen
I'll
to it. I
check
think
it
it's
out.
one of the best albums of 2025. So, all the things, it's sort of a collage of activity, but
Jeffrey, I adore you. It's always a pleasure to see your face, and I love talking to you. Thank you for all your gems. I'll see you very soon, actually, probably in about a week at Tiny Desk, which I'm very excited about.
you will indeed. And thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure to chop it up with you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to meet you. I can't wait to see you in person, Jeff.
Indeed.
All right.
Cool.
Bye, babe. I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.
Bye.
What a doll.
He's the best.
Totally.
He's the best. He's always full of things like that. Oh, if you're in town, check this show out, put you on the list. Just like always have fun stuff going on that you can just hop on. It was always like a fun hanging out in LA because he would just be like, oh, what's your weekend like? And he'd just like raffle off all these things that he like needed to show up to or wanted to or check this person out. It was fun to just tag along and be like, yeah, I'm like a great tag along friend. And of course, we end up having these like deep spiritual conversations and then walk into this crazy rave. And it's just the full range of life that I need. It's nice when people can be on that level.
Especially, we didn't even touch on the sobriety aspect because I
Yeah.
think music as an industry and music going, there's a lot of shit there. Like addiction,
Sure.
drugs, alcohol, all of the things. And to
Right.
be able to appreciate music with a clear mind and a clear, grounded perspective is such a different experience. There's so much depth and beauty to like that experience, and have somebody to share that with that gets it is
Sure. Yeah. It's because like we met, I think I had maybe a year and a half of sobriety and Jeff had 6 months. So we both were like
wow.
at a very interesting point in our lives where typically most people, when they get sober in that range, have some sort of like, okay, like I can walk again, but I don't want to walk in the same direction that I've been in. What direction am I going to go into? And I was in the midst of it. Obviously, I decided to move to California from here, which was like obviously a huge move, not knowing anything. And then Jeff was very much in the same place. He landed in LA, but wasn't sure if that's what he was doing. So that's always been the root of our interactions, was like sobriety was a little bit first because we leaned on each other in a lot of ways. When you find like-minded people who are also sober, you cling to them because that's the antidote. Like in sobriety, like you want connection because it's the opposite of addiction. You want to feel seen. You'll finish each other's sentences because, that sort of deepness is like what you're searching in addiction. And so it's like such a remedy. And just, we have just supported each other along the way and like really big things. Like I fully remember when he was like, yeah, I think I'm starting a label. And then I told him, I was like, I think I'm starting a label. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me. But he would like come up to go to parties and we would always like share. Tell me what you think of this artist, and would play me their demo. So it was nice to have an inside scoop on his perspective of artists before some of them have really taken off. And so it's been cool to have my perspective, I think, in his journey has been pretty interesting. And I felt pretty grateful for it.
I like what you said. Connection is the antidote to addiction. where I think connection makes things clearer. It's so much of the fun new work I've been doing with clients is layering in their human design. And for a lot of people's
Nice.
human design, it's like when you are lost, just connect with people. And I think that is so true for I feel like almost all humans. It's when you are lost, connect.
It lets go of your own perspective of something and allows you to have another or not have one in the moment, to be free of the one that's making you feel lost.
Yes.
With my clients, we focus so much around mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. Like, I think social health is a real thing. And we mentioned with Jeff, when you get into your 40s, things change. Some people really don't think that social health is necessary at that level anymore. Or you're getting it, but it's in a different way. It's maybe with your kids or wife. And I'm not saying that's not social, but so much of this epidemic of loneliness is because we don't make it as important as other needs we always talk about. Socialization was such an integral part of our existence as humans up until about 100 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone, you would have died if you wanted to be that different. Like, they would have kicked you out the tribe, girl. You ain't got no food to eat. You ain't gonna kill an animal by yourself. Like, there was so many things that were imperative. And now we feel like so many of these things are optional. Our bodies, the way our brain reacts even to some of our body states, depends on our ability to connect and how much of that is happening. And real connection, I'm not saying jumping on a comment thing isn't interaction, but there's a difference.
Oh, definitely, for sure. I do think that there are some people wired very independently versus being wired for the collective.
Sure.
But regardless, human connection, like what Jeff was saying is like artists really can't be artists without collaboration. Him even saying that he has seen this trend of people wanting to create in a vacuum, and it's just so much harder. If you are creating, you need to be in connection. Just as like mental health hygiene, connection is essential. Like sleep is essential. Water is
Yeah,
essential.
totally. 100 years ago, the outliers were like really toxic, like really like bad people, or people who had, what we know now is like mental illness, right? But now I feel like a lot of people feel the need to isolate because they feel like the general population is toxic, right? They see
Oh, definitely.
like
Yeah.
heteronormativity in many ways can have its own toxic traits, right? For
Yes.
sure. So there is more of that, like, well, sometimes I feel like I'm better by myself. And like, not wrong, but creating your own tribe, I think, is still necessary. Like, kind of
Yeah.
that chosen family, or even limiting your socialization, but not so much to where you think you don't need it.
I just think, to support what you're saying, almost every single one of my clients and so many people that I meet and talk to are just like, I just want community. I'm like missing connection. Like for a minute there, I was like, maybe I should be a friendship coach, because I felt like all of my coaching conversations with people was like how to help people in their 40s make good friends.
That's all
Right?
people in early recovery. That's all I talk about. How do you re-socialize? How do you connect with people? How do you make friends again?
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
it. I
Well,
get it.
I'm so glad that you have connected Jeff into my world, because what a great
Wee.
friend to you he seems to be, and what a lovely human being.
Hey there. Thanks for listening, and we hope you're feeling more curious and inspired to make a step towards your passion. To keep you connected, take a second to follow us on Instagram at Absolutely Sure No Idea, and follow us on Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts for upcoming episodes. Lastly, help us grow this baby by sharing an episode with a friend who needs to hear it. All right, until next time.